Chapter 7. The town of Hagsgate was shaped like a footprint, long toes splaying from a broad paw and ending in the dark claws of a digger. And indeed, where the other towns of King Haggard's realm seemed to scratch like sparrows at the mean land, Hagsgate was well and deeply dug in. Its streets were smoothly paved, its gardens glowed, and its proud houses might have grown up out of the earth like trees. Lights shone in every window, and the three travelers could hear voices and dogs barking and dishes being scrubbed until they squeaked. They halted by a high hedge, wondering, "Do you suppose we took a wrong turn somewhere, and this isn't Hagsgate at all?" Molly whispered. She brushed foolishly at her hopeless rags and tatters. "I knew I should have brought my good dress," she sighed. Schmendrick rubbed the back of his neck wearily. "It's Hagsgate," he answered her. "It must be Hagsgate, and yet there's no smell of sorcery, no air of black magic. But why the legends, then? Why the fables and fairy tales? Very confusing, especially when you've had half a turnip for dinner." The unicorn said nothing. Beyond the town, darker than dark, King Haggard's castle teetered like a lunatic on stilts, and beyond the castle the sea slid. The scent of the Red Bull moved in the night, cold among the town smells of cooking and living. Schmendrick said, "The good people must all be indoors, counting their blessings. I'll hail them." He stepped forward and threw back his cloak, but he had not yet opened his mouth when a hard voice said out of the air, "Save your breath, stranger, while you have it." 4 men sprang from behind the hedge. 2 of them set their swords at Schmendrick's throat, while another guarded Molly with a pair of pistols. The 4th approached the unicorn to seize her mane, but she reared up, shining fiercely, and he jumped away. "Your name," the man who had first spoken demanded of Schmendrick. He was middle-aged or more, as they all were, dressed in fine, dull clothing. "Gick," said the magician, because of the swords. "Gick," mused the man with the pistols, "an alien name." "Naturally," the first man said. "All names are alien in Hagsgate. Well, Mr. Gick," he went on, lowering his sword slightly to the point where Schmendrick's collarbones converged, "if you and Mrs. Gick would kindly tell us what brings you skulking here." Schmendrick found his voice at that. "I hardly know the woman," he roared. "My name is Schmendrick, Schmendrick the magician, and I am hungry and tired and unpleasant. Put those things away, or you'll each have a scorpion by the wrong end." The men looked at one another. "A magician," said the first man. "The very thing." 2 of the others nodded, but the man who had tried to capture the unicorn grumbled. "Anyone can say he's a magician these days. The old standards are gone. The old values have been abandoned. Besides, a real magician has a beard." "Well, if he isn't a magician," the first man said lightly, "he'll wish he were soon enough." He sheathed his sword and bowed to Schmendrick and Molly. "I am Drin," he said, "and it is possibly a pleasure to welcome you to Hagsgate. You spoke of being hungry, I believe. That's easily remedied, and then perhaps you will do us a good turn in your professional capacity. Come with me." Grown suddenly gracious and apologetic, he led them toward a lighted inn, while the other 3 men followed close behind. More townsfolk came running up now, streaming eagerly from their houses with their own dinners half-eaten and their tea left steaming, so that by the time Schmendrick and Molly were seated, there were nearly 100 people wedged together on the inn's long benches, jamming into the doorway and falling through the windows. The unicorn, unnoticed, paced slowly after, a white mare with strange eyes. The man named Dren sat at the same table with Schmendrick and Molly, chattering as they ate and filling their glasses with a flurry black wine. Molly Grew drank very little. She sat quietly looking at the faces around her and noting that none seemed any younger than Dren's face, though a few were much older. There was a way in which all the Hagsgate faces were very much alike, but she could not find it. "And now," Drin said when the meal was over, "now you must permit me to explain why we greeted you so uncivilly." "Psh, No need, Schmendrick chuckled. The wine had made him chuckly and easy, and had brightened his green eyes to gold. What I want to know is the reason for the rumors that have Hagsgate full of ghouls and werewolves. Most absurd thing I ever heard of. Drin smiled. He was a naughty man, with a turtle's hard, empty jaws. It's the same thing, he said. Listen. The town of Hagsgate is under a curse. The room was suddenly very still, and in the beery light of the faces of the townsfolk looked as tight and pale as cheese. Schmendrick laughed again. A blessing, you mean. In this bony kingdom of old haggards, you are like another land altogether, a spring, an oasis. I agree with you that there's enchantment here, but I drink to it. Dren stopped him as he raised his glass. Not that toast, my friend. Will you drink to a woe 50 years old? It is that long since our sorrow fell, when King Haggard built his castle by the sea. When the witch built it, I think, Schmendrick wagged a finger at him. Credit where it's due, after all. Ah, you know that story, Drin said. Then you must also know that Haggard refused to pay the witch when her task was completed. The magician nodded. Aye, and she cursed him for his greed. Cursed the castle, rather. But what had that to do with Hagsgate? The town had done the witch no wrong. No, Drin replied, but neither had it done her any good. She could not unmake the castle, or would not, for she fancied herself an artistic sort and boasted that her work was years ahead of its time. Anyway, she came to the elders of Hagsgate and demanded that they force Haggard to pay what was due her. Look at me and see yourselves, she rasped. That's the true test of a town or of a king. A lord who cheats an ugly old witch will cheat his own folk by and by. Stop him while you can, before you grow used to him. Drin sipped his wine and thoughtfully filled Schmendrick's glass once more. Haggard paid her no money, he went on, and Hagsgate, alas, paid her no heed. She was treated politely and referred to the proper authorities, whereupon she flew into a fury and screamed that in our eagerness to make no enemies at all, we had now made two. He paused, covering his eyes with lids so thin that Molly was sure she could see through them like a bird. With his eyes closed, he said, it was then that she cursed Haggard's castle, and cursed our town as well. Thus his greed brought ruin upon us all. In the sighing silence, Molly Grew's voice came down like a hammer on a horseshoe, as though she were again berating poor Captain Cully. Haggard's less at fault than yourselves, she mocked the folk of Hagsgate, for he was only one thief, and you were many. You earned your trouble by your own avarice, not your king's. Drin opened his eyes and gave her an angry look. We earned nothing, he protested. It was our parents and grandparents whom the witch asked for help, and I'll grant you that they were much to blame as Haggard, in their way. We would have handled the matter quite differently, and every middle-aged face in the room scowled at every older face. One of the old men spoke up in a voice that wheezed and meowed. You would have done just as we did. There were crops to harvest, and stock to tend, as there still is. There was Haggard to live with, as there still is. We know very well how you would have behaved. You are our children. Drin glowered him down, and other men began to shout spitefully, but the magician quieted them all by asking, what was the curse? Could it have anything to do with the Red Bull? The name rang coldly, even in the bright room, and Molly felt suddenly lonely. On an impulse, she added her own question, though it had nothing to do with the conversation. Have any of you ever seen a unicorn? It was then that she learned two things, the difference between silence and utter silence, and that she had been quite right to ask that question. The Hagsgate faces tried not to move, but they did move. Drin said carefully, we never see the bull, and we never speak of him. Nothing that concerns him can be any business of ours. As for unicorns, there are none. There never were. He poured the black wine again. I will tell you the words of the curse, he said, and folded his hands before him and began to chant. You whom Haggard holds in thrall, share his feast and share his fall. You shall see your fortune flower, till the torrent takes the tower. Yet none but one of Hagsgate town may bring the castle swirling down. A few others joined in as he recited the old malediction. Their voices were sad and far, as though they were not in the room at all, but were tumbling in the wind, high over the inn's chimney, helpless as dead leaves. What is it about their faces? Molly wondered. I almost know. The magician sat silently by her, rolling his wineglass in his long hands. When those words were first spoken, Drin said, Hagrid had not been long in the country, and all of it was still soft and blooming, all but the town of Hagsgate. Hagsgate was then as this land has become, a scrabbly, bare place where men put great stones on the roofs of their huts to keep them from blowing away. He grinned bitterly at the older men. Crops to harvest, stocks to tend. You grew cabbages and rutabagas and a few pale potatoes. And in all of Hagsgate there was but one weary cow. Strangers thought the town accursed, having offended some vindictive witch or other. Molly felt the unicorn go by in the street, then turn and come back, restless as the torches on the walls that bowed and wriggled. She wanted to run out to her, but instead she asked quietly, and afterward, when that had come true, Drin answered, From that moment we have known nothing but bounty. Our grim earth has grown so kind that gardens and orchards spring up by themselves. We need neither to plant nor to tend them. Our flocks multiply, our craftsmen become more clever in their sleep. The air we breathe and the water we drink keep us from ever knowing illness. All sorrow parts to go around us. And this has come about while the rest of the realm, once so green, has shriveled to cinders under Haggard's hand. For 50 years none but he and we have prospered. It is as though all others have been cursed. Share his feast and share his fall, Schmendrick murmured. I see. He gulped another glass of the black wine and laughed. But old King Haggard still rules, and will until the sea overflows. You don't know what a real curse is. Let me tell you my troubles. Easy tears suddenly glittered in his eyes. To begin with, my mother never liked me. She pretended, but I knew. Drin interrupted him, and just then Molly realized what was strange about the folk of Hagsgate. Every one of them was well and warmly dressed, but the faces that peered out of their fine clothes were the faces of poor people, as cold as ghosts, and too hungry to eat. Drin said, Yet none but one of Hagsgate town may bring the castle swirling down. How can we delight in our good fortune when we know that it must end, and that one of us will end it? Every day makes us richer, and brings us one day nearer to our doom. Magician, for 50 years we have lived leanly, avoided attachments, untied all habits, readying ourselves for the sea. We have taken not a moment's joy in our wealth or in anything else, for joy is just one more thing to lose. Pity Hagsgate, strangers, for in all the wretched world there can be no town more unhappy. Lost, 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 the townsfolk whimpered. Misery, misery we. Molly Grew stared wordlessly at them, but Schmendrick said respectfully, That's a good curse. That's a professional job. I always say, whatever you're having done, go to an expert. It pays in the long run. Drin frowned, and Molly nudged Schmendrick. The magician blinked. Oh, well, what is it you wish of me? I must warn you I'm not a very skilled sorcerer, but I will be glad to lift this curse from you, if I can. I had not taken you for any more than you are, Drin answered. But such as you are, you should do as well as any. I think we will leave the curse the way it is. If it were lifted, We might not become poor again, but we would no longer grow steadily richer, and that would be just as bad. No, our real task is to keep Haggard's town from falling, and since the hero who will destroy it can only come from Hagsgate, this should not be impossible. For one thing, we allow no strangers to settle here. We keep them away, by force if we must, but more often by guile. Those dark tales of Hagsgate that you spoke of, we invented them ourselves and spread them as widely as we could to make certain that we would have few visitors. He smiled proudly with his hollow jaws. Schmendrick propped his chin on his knuckles and regarded Drin with a sagging smile. "What about your own children?" he asked. "How can you keep one of them from growing up to fulfill the curse?" He looked around the inn, sleepily studying every wrinkled face that looked back at him. "Come to think of it," he said slowly, "there are no young children in this town. How early do you send children to bed in Hagsgate?" No one answered him. Molly could hear the blood creaking in ears and eyes, and skin twitching like water plucked by the wind. Then Drin said, "We have no children. We have had none since the day that curse was laid upon us." He coughed into his fist and added, "It seemed the most obvious way of foiling the witch." Schmendrick threw back his head and laughed without making a sound, laughed to make the torches dance. Molly realized that the magician was quite drunk. Drin's mouth disappeared, and his eyes hardened into cracked porcelain. "I see no humor in our plight," he said softly. "None at all." "None," Schmendrick gurgled, bowing over the table and spilling his wine. "None, pardon me, none at all." Under the angry gaze of 200 eyes, he managed to recover himself and reply seriously to Drin. "Then it would seem to me that you have no worries. None that would worry you, anyway." A small wee of laughter sneaked out between his lips like steam from a tea kettle. "So it would seem." Drin leaned forward and touched Schmendrick's wrist with 2 fingers. "But I have not told you all the truth. 21 years ago, a child was born in Hagsgate. Whose child it was we never knew. I found it myself as I was crossing the marketplace one winter's night. It was lying on a butcher's block, not crying, although there was snow, but warm and chuckling under a comforter of stray cats. They were all purring together, and the sound was heavy with knowledge. I stood by the strange cradle for a long time, pondering while the snow fell and the cats purred prophecy." He stopped, and Molly Grew said eagerly, "You took the child home with you, of course, and raised it as your own." Drin laid his hands, palm up, on the table. "I chased the cats away," he said, "and went home alone." Molly's face turned the color of mist. Drin shrugged slightly. "I know the birth of a hero when I see it," he said. "Omens and portents, snakes in the nursery. Had it not been for the cats, I might have chanced the child, but they made it so obvious, so mythological. What was I to do, knowingly harbor Hagsgate's doom?" His lip twitched as though a hook had set in it. "As it happens, I erred, but it was on the side of tenderness. When I returned at sunrise, the baby had vanished." Schmendrick was drawing pictures with his finger in a puddle of wine, and might have heard nothing at all. Dren went on. "Naturally, no one ever admitted to leaving the child in the marketplace, and though we searched every house from cellar to dovecote, we never found it again. I might have concluded that wolves had taken the brat, or even that I had dreamed the whole encounter, cats and all, but for the fact that on the very next day a herald of King Haggard's came, riding into town, ordering us to rejoice. After 30 years of waiting, the king had a son at last." He looked away from the look on Molly's face. "Our foundling, incidentally, was a boy." Schmendrick licked the tip of his finger and looked up. "Lear," he said thoughtfully. "Prince Lear." "But there was no other way to account for his appearance?" "Not likely," Drin snorted. "Any woman that would marry Haggard, even Haggard would refuse." He gave out the tale that the boy was a nephew, whom he graciously adopted on the death of his parents. "But Haggard has no relatives, no family." There are those who say that he was born of an overcast, as Venus was born out of the sea. No one would give King Haggard a child to raise. The magician calmly held his glass and filled it himself when Drin refused. Well, he got one somewhere, and good for him, but how could he have come by your little cat baby? Drin said, He walks into Hagsgate at night. Not often, but now and then. Many of us have seen him. Tall Haggard, gray as driftwood, prowling alone under an iron moon, picking up dropped coins, broken dishes, spoons, stones, handkerchiefs, rings, stepped on apples, anything, everything. No reason to it. It was Haggard who took the child. I am as certain of it as I am certain that Prince Lear is the one who will topple the tower and sink Haggard and Hagsgate together. I hope he is, Molly broke in. I hope Prince Lear is the baby you left to die, and I hope he drowns your town, and I hope the fish nibble you bare as corncobs. Schmendrick kicked her ankle as hard as he could, for the listeners were beginning to hiss like embers, and a few were rising to their feet. He asked again, What is it you wish of me? You are on your way to Haggard's castle, I believe. Schmendrick nodded. Ah, Drin said, now. A clever magician would find it simple to become friendly with Prince Lear, who was reputed to be a young man of eagerness and curiosity. A clever magician might be acquainted with all manner of odd potions and powders, poppets and philters, herbs and banes and unguents. A clever magician, mind you, I said clever, no more. A clever magician might be able to, under certain circumstances. He let the rest drift away unspoken, but no less said. For a meal, Schmendrick stood up, knocking his chair over. He leaned on the table with both hands, breathing harshly. Is that the going rate these days? Dinner and wine the price of a poisoned prince? You'll have to do better than that, friend Drin. I wouldn't do in a chimney sweep for such a fee. Molly gripped his arm, crying, Why, what are you saying? The magician shook her hand away, but at the same time he lowered one eyelid in a slow wink. Drin leaned back in his chair, smiling. I never haggle with a professional, he said. 25 pieces of gold. They haggled for half an hour. Schmendrick demanded 100 gold pieces, and Drin, refusing to offer more than 40, at last they settled at 70, half to be paid then, and half upon Schmendrick's successful return. Drin counted out the money on the spot from a leather pouch at his belt. You'll spend the night in Hagsgate, of course, he said. I would be pleased to put you up myself. But the magician shook his head. I think not. We will go to the castle, since we're so near it now. The sooner there, the sooner back, eh? And he grinned, a crafty and conspiratorial grin. Haggard's castle is always dangerous, Drin warned, but it is never more dangerous than at night. They say that about Hagsgate, too, Schmendrick replied. You mustn't believe everything you hear, Drin. He walked to the door of the inn, and Molly followed him. There he turned and beamed at the folk of Hagsgate, hunched in their finery. I would like to leave you with this last thought, he told them. The most professional curse ever snarled or croaked or thundered can have no effect on a pure heart. Good night. Outside, the night lay coiled in the street, cobra cold and scaled with stars. There was no moon. Schmendrick stepped out boldly, chuckling to himself and jingling his gold coins. Without looking at Molly, he said, Suckers, to assume so lightly that all magicians dabble in death. Now, if they had wanted me to lift the curse, I might have done that for no more than the meal. I might have done it for a single glass of wine. I'm glad you didn't, Molly said savagely. They deserve their fate. They deserve worse. To leave a child out in the snow. Well, if they hadn't, he couldn't have grown up to be a prince. Haven't you ever been in a fairy tale before? The magician's voice was kind and drunken, and his eyes were as bright as his new money. The hero has to make a prophecy come true, and the villain is the one who has to stop him. Though, in another kind of story, it's more often the other way around. And a hero has to be in trouble from the moment of his birth, or he's not a real hero. It's a great relief to find out about Prince Lear. I've been waiting for this tale to turn up a leading man. The unicorn was there as a star is suddenly there, moving a little way ahead of them, a sail in the dark. Molly said, If Lear is the hero, what is she? That's different. Haggard and Lear and Dren and you and I, we are in a fairy tale and must go where it goes. But she is real. She is real. Schmendrick yawned and hiccuped and shivered all at once. We'd better hurry, he said. Perhaps we should have stayed the night, but old Dren makes me nervous. I'm sure I deceived him completely, but all the same. It seemed to Molly, dreaming and waking as she walked, that Hag's gate was stretching itself like a paw to hold the three of them back, curling around them and batting them gently back and forth, so that they trod in their own tracks over and over. In 100 years they reached the last house and the end of the town. In another 50 years they had blundered through the damp fields, the vineyards, and the crouching orchards. Molly dreamed that sheep leered at them from treetops, and that cold cows stepped on their feet and shoved them off the withering path. But the light of the unicorn sailed on ahead, and Molly followed it, awake or asleep. King Haggard's castle was stalking in the sky, a blind black bird that fished the valley by night. Molly could hear the beating of its wings, and the unicorn's breath stirred in her hair, and she heard Schmendrick asking, "How many men?" 3 men, the unicorn said. They have been behind us since we left Hag's Gate, but now they are coming swiftly. Listen. Steps too soft for their quickness, voices too muffled to mean any good. The magician rubbed his eyes. Perhaps Dren has started to feel guilty about underpaying his poisoner, he murmured. Perhaps his conscience is keeping him awake. Anything is possible. Perhaps I have feathers. He took Molly by the arm and pulled her down into a hard hollow by the side of the road. The unicorn lay nearby, still as moonlight, daggers gleaming like fishtails on the dark sea. A voice, suddenly loud and angry. "I tell you we've lost them. We passed them a mile back where I heard that rustling. I'm damned if I'll run any further." "Be still," a second voice whispered fiercely. "Do you want them to escape and betray us? You're afraid of the magician, but you'd do better to be afraid of the Red Bull. If Haggard finds out about our half of the curse, he'll send the bull to trample us all into crumbs." The first man answered in a softer tone. "It isn't that I'm afraid. A magician without a beard is no magician at all, but we're wasting our time." They left the road and cut across country as soon as they knew we were following. We could chase along here all night and never come up with them. Another voice, wearier than the first 2. "We have chased them all night. Look over here. Dawn is coming." Molly found that she had wriggled halfway under Schmendrick's black cloak and buried her face in a clump of spiny dead grass. She dared not raise her head, but she opened her eyes and saw that the air was growing strangely light. The second man said, "You're a fool. It's a good 2 hours to morning, and besides, we're heading west." "In that case," the third voice replied, "I'm going home." Footsteps started briskly back up the road. The first man called, "Wait, don't go. Wait, I'll go with you." To the second man, he murmured hastily, "I'm not going home. I just want to retrace our trail a little way. I still think I heard them, and I've dropped my tinderbox somewhere." Molly could hear him edging off as he spoke. "Damn you for cowards," the second man swore. "Wait a moment, then. Will you wait while I try what Dren told me?" The retreating footsteps hesitated, and he chanted loudly. "Warmer than summer, more filling than food, sweeter than women, and dearer than blood." "Hurry," the third voice said. "Hurry, look at that sky. What is this nonsense?" Even the second man's voice was growing nervous. "It isn't nonsense. Dren treats his money so well that it cannot bear to be parted from him. Most touching relationship you ever saw. This is the way he calls to it," he went on rapidly, quavering a little. "Stronger than water and kinder than drove. Say the name of the one you love."
"Dren!"
rang the gold coins in Schmendrick's purse.
"Dren! Dren! Dren!"
Then everything happened. The ragged black cloak whipped against Molly's cheek as Schmendrick rolled to his knees, groping desperately for the purse. It buzzed like a rattlesnake in his hand. He hurled it far into the brush, but the 3 men were running at them together, daggers as red as though they had already been struck. Beyond King Haggard's castle, A burning brightness was rising, breaking into the night like a great shoulder. The magician stood erect, menacing the attackers with demons, metamorphoses, paralyzing ailments, and secret judo holds. Molly picked up a rock. With an old, gay, terrible cry of ruin, the unicorn reared out of her hiding place. Her hooves came slashing down like a rain of razors. Her mane raged, and on her forehead she wore a plume of lightning. The three assassins dropped their daggers and hid their faces, and even Molly Grew and Schmendrick cowered before her. But the unicorn saw none of them. Mad, dancing, sea-white, she bellowed their challenge again, and the brightness answered her with a bellow, like the sound of ice breaking up in the spring. Dren's men fled, stumbling and shrieking. Haggard's castle was on fire, tossing wildly in a sudden cold wind. Molly said aloud, "But it has to be the sea. It's supposed to be." She thought that she could see a window as far away as it was, and a gray face. Then the Red Bull came. Chapter 8. He was the color of blood, not the springing blood of the heart, but the blood that stirs under an old wound that never really healed. A terrible light poured from him like sweat, and his roar started landslides flowing into one another. His horns were as pale as scars. For one moment, the unicorn faced him, frozen as a wave about to break. Then the light of her horn went out, and she turned and fled. The Red Bull bellowed again and leapt down after her. The unicorn had never been afraid of anything. She was immortal, but she could be killed. By a harpy, by a dragon or a chimera, by a stray arrow loosed at a squirrel. But dragons could only kill her. They could never make her forget what she was, or themselves forget that even dead she would still be more beautiful than they. The Red Bull did not know her, and yet she could feel that it was herself he sought, and no white mare. The fear blew her dark then, and she ran away, while the bull's raging ignorance filled the sky and spilled over into the valley. The trees lunged at her, and she veered wildly among them, she who slipped so softly through eternity without bumping into anything. Behind her, they were breaking like glass in the rush of the Red Bull. He roared once again, and a great branch clubbed her on the shoulder so hard that she staggered and fell. She was up immediately, but roots humped under her feet as she ran, and others burrowed as busily as moles to cut across the path. Vines struck at her like strangling snakes. Creepers wove webs between the trees. Dead boughs crashed all around her. She fell a second time. The bull's hoofs on the earth boomed through her bones, and she cried out. She must have found some way out of the trees, for she was running on the hard, bald plain that lay beyond the prosperous pasture lands of Hagsgate. Now she had room to race, and a unicorn is only loping when she leaves the hunter kicking his burst and sinking horse. She moved with the speed of life, winking from one body to another or running down a sword, swifter than anything burdened with legs or wings, yet without looking back, she knew that the Red Bull was gaining on her, coming like the moon, the sullen, swollen hunter's moon. She could feel the shock of the livid horns in her side, as though she had already been struck. Ripe, sharp cornstalks leaned together to make a hedge at her breast, but she trampled them down. Silver wheat fields turned cold and gummy when the bull breathed on them. They dragged at her legs like snow. Still she ran, bleeding and defeated, hearing the butterflies' icy chiming. They passed down all the roads long ago, and the Red Bull ran close behind them. He had killed them all. Suddenly the bull was facing her, as though he had been lifted like a chess piece, swooped through the air, and set down again to bar her way. He did not charge immediately, and she did not run. He had been huge when she first fled him, but in the pursuit he had grown so vast that she could not imagine all of him. Now he seemed to curve with the curve of the bloodshot sky, his legs like great whirlwinds, his head rolling like the northern lights. His nostrils wrinkled and rumbled as he searched for her, and the unicorn realized that the Red Bull was blind. If he had rushed her then, she would have met him, tiny and despairing with her darkened horn, even though he stamped her to pieces. He was swifter than she, better to face him now than be caught running. But the bull advanced slowly, with a kind of sinister daintiness, as though he were trying not to frighten her, and again she broke before him. With low, sad cry, she whirled and ran back the way she had come, back through the tattered fields and over the plain, toward King Haggard's castle, dark and hunched as ever. And the Red Bull went after her, following her fear. Schmendrick and Molly had been spun away like chips when the bull flew by. Molly slammed breathless and witless against the ground, and the magician hurled into a tangle of thorns that cost him half his cloak and an eighth of his skin. They got up when they could and went limping in pursuit, leaning on one another. Neither said a word. The way through the trees was easier for them than the unicorn had found it, for the Red Bull had been there since. Molly and the magician scrambled over great tree trunks, not only smashed, but trodden halfway into the ground, and dropped on hands and knees to crawl around crevices they could not fathom in the dark. No hooves could have made these, Molly thought dazedly. The earth had torn itself shrinking from the burden of the bull. She thought of the unicorn, and her heart paled. When they came out on the plain, they saw her, far and faint, a tuft of white water on the wind, almost invisible to the glare of the Red Bull. Molly grew a little crazy with weariness and fear, saw them moving the way stars and stones move through space, forever falling, forever following, forever alone. The Red Bull would not catch the unicorn, not until now caught up with new, bygone with begin. Molly smiled serenely, but the blazing shadow loomed over the unicorn until the bull seemed to be all around her. She reared, swerved, and sprang away in another direction to meet the bull there, his head lowered and his jaws drooling thunder. Again she turned, and again, backing and sidling, making crafty little dashes to this side or that, and each time the Red Bull headed her off by standing still. He did not attack, but he left her no way to go, save one. "He's driving her," Schmendrick said quietly. "If he wanted to kill her, he'd have done it by now. He's driving her the way he drove the others, to the castle, to Haggard. I wonder why." Molly said, "Do something." Her voice was strangely calm and casual, and the magician answered her in the same tone. "There is nothing I can do." The unicorn fled once more, pitifully tireless, and the Red Bull let her have room to run, but none to turn. When she faced him for a third time, she was close enough for Molly to see her hind legs shivering like those of a frightened dog. Now she set herself to stand, pawing the ground wickedly and laying back her small, lean ears. But she could make no sound, and her horn did not grow bright again. She cowered when the Red Bull's bellow made the sky ripple and crack, and yet she did not back away. "Please," Molly Grew said, "please do something." Schmendrick turned on her, and his face was wild with helplessness. "What can I do? What can I do with my magic? Hat tricks, penny tricks, or the one where I scramble stones to make an omelet? Would that entertain the Red Bull, do you think? Or shall I try the trick with the singing oranges? I'll try whatever you suggest, for I would certainly be happy to be of some practical use." Molly did not answer him. The bull came on, and the unicorn crouched lower and lower, until she seemed about to snap in two. Schmendrick said, "I know what to do. If I could, I'd change her into some other creature, some beast too humble for the bull to be concerned with. But only a great magician, a wizard like Nikos, who was my teacher, would have that kind of power. To transform a unicorn. Anyone who could do that could juggle the seasons and shuffle the years like playing cards, and I have no more power than you have. Less, for you can touch her, and I cannot." Then he said suddenly, "Look, it's over." The unicorn was standing very still before the Red Bull, her head down and her whiteness drabbled to a soapy gray. She looked gaunt and small, and even Molly, who loved her, could not keep from seeing that a unicorn is an absurd animal when the shining has gone out of her. tail like a lion's tail, deer legs, goat feet, the mane cold and fine as foam over my hand, the charred horn, the eyes. Oh, the eyes. Molly took hold of Schmendrick's arm and dug her nails into it as hard as she could. "You have magic," she said. She heard her own voice, as deep and clear as Sybil's. "Maybe you can't find it, but it's there. You called up Robin Hood, and there is no Robin Hood, but he came, and he was real, and that is magic. You have all the power you need, if you dare to look for it." Schmendrick regarded her in silence, staring as hard as though his green eyes were beginning the search for his magic in Molly Grew's eyes. The bull stepped lightly toward the unicorn, no longer pursuing, but commanding her with the weight of his presence. As she moved ahead of him, docile, obedient, he followed like a sheepdog, guiding her in the direction of King Haggard's jagged tower and the sea. "Oh, please!" Molly's voice was crumbling now. "Please, it's not fair. It can't be happening. He'll drive her to Haggard, and no one will ever see her again. No one. Please. You're a magician. You won't let him." Her fingers struck even deeper into Schmendrick's arm. "Do something," she wept. "Don't let him. Do something." Schmendrick was prying futilely at her clenched fingers. "I'm not going to do a damn thing," he said through his teeth, "until you let go of my arm." "Oh," Molly said, "I'm sorry." "You can cut off the circulation like that, you know," the magician said severely. He rubbed his arm and took a few steps forward, into the path of the Red Bull. There he stood with his arms folded and his head high, though it dropped now and then, because he was very tired. "Maybe this time," Molly heard him mutter. "Maybe this time. Nikos said—" What was it that Nikos said? I don't remember. It has been so long. There was an odd old sorrow in his voice that Molly had never heard before. Then a gaiety leapt up like a flame as he said, "Well, who knows, who knows? If this is not the time, perhaps I can make it so. There's this much of comfort, Friend Schmendrick. For once, I don't see how you can possibly make things any worse than they already are." And he laughed softly. The Red Bull, being blind, took no notice of the tall figure in the road until he was almost upon it. Then he halted, sniffing the air, storm stirring in his throat, but a certain confusion showing in the swing of his great head. The unicorn stopped when he stopped, and Schmendrick's breath broke to see her so tractable. "Run!" he called to her. "Run now!" But she never looked at him, or back at the bull, or at anything but the ground. And the sound of Schmendrick's voice, the bull's rumble, grew louder and more menacing. He seemed eager to be out of the valley with the unicorn, and the magician thought he knew why. Beyond the towering brightness of the Red Bull, he could see 2 or 3 sallow stars and a cautious hint of a warmer light. Dawn was near. "He doesn't care for daylight," Schmendrick said to himself. "That's worth knowing." Once more he shouted to the unicorn to fly, but his only answer came in the form of a roar like a drum royal. The unicorn bolted forward, and Schmendrick had to spring out of her way, or she would have run him down. Close behind her came the bull, driving her swiftly now, as the wind drives the thin, torn mist. The power of his passage picked Schmendrick up and dropped him elsewhere, tumbling and rolling to keep him from being trampled. His eyes jarred blind, and his head full of flames. He thought he heard Molly Grew scream. Scrabbling to one knee, he saw that the Red Bull had herded the unicorn almost to the beginning of the trees. If she would only try one more time to escape, but she was the bull's and not her own. The magician had one glimpse of her, pale and lost between the pale horns, before the wild red shoulders surged across his sight. Then, swaying and sick and beaten, he closed his eyes and let his hopelessness march through him, until something woke somewhere that had wakened in him once before. He cried aloud for fear and joy. What words the magic spoke this second time he never knew, surely. They left him like eagles, and he let them go, and when the last one was away, the emptiness rushed back with a thunderclap that threw him on his face. It happened as quickly as that. This time he knew before he had picked himself up that the power had been and gone. Ahead, the Red Bull was standing still, nosing at something on the ground. Schmindrick could not see the unicorn. He went forward as fast as he could, but it was Molly who first drew near enough to see what the bull was sniffing. She put her fingers in her mouth like a child. At the feet of the red bull there lay a young girl, spilled into a very small heap of light and shadow. She was naked, and her skin was the color of snow by moonlight. Fine tangled hair, white as a waterfall, came down almost to the small of her back. Her face was hidden in her arms. "Oh," Molly said. "Oh, what have you done?" And heedless of any danger, she ran to the girl and knelt beside her. The bull raised his huge blind head and swung it slowly in Schmindrick's direction. He seemed to be waning and fading as the gray sky grew light, though he still smoldered as savagely bright as crawling lava. The magician wondered what his true size was and his color when he was alone. Once more the red bull sniffed at the still form, stirring it with his freezing breath. Then, without a sound, he bounded away into the trees and was gone. In 3 gigantic strides. Schmindrick had a last vision of him as he gained the rim of the valley, no shape at all, but a swirling darkness, the red darkness you see when you close your eyes in pain. Horns had become the 2 sharpest towers of old King Haggard's crazy castle. Molly Grew had taken the white girl's head into her lap and was whispering over and over, "What have you done?" The girl's face, quiet in sleep and close to smiling, was the most beautiful that Schmindrick had ever seen. It hurt him and warmed him at the same time. Molly smoothed the strange hair, and Schmindrick noticed on the forehead, above and between the closed eyes, a small raised mark, darker than the rest of her skin. It was neither a scar nor a bruise. It looked like a flower. "What do you mean, what have I done?" he demanded of the moaning Molly. "Only saved her from the red bull by magic, that's what I've done. By magic, woman, by my own true magic." Now he was helpless with delight, for he wanted to dance, and he wanted to be still. He shook with shouting and speeches, and yet there was nothing that he wanted to say. He ended by laughing foolishly, hugging himself until he gasped, and sprawling down beside Molly as his legs let go. "Give me your cloak," Molly said. The magician beamed at her, blinking. She reached over and ungently pulled the shredded cloak from his shoulders. Then she wrapped it around the sleeping girl, as much as it would wrap. The girl shone through it like the sun through leaves. "Doubtless you are wondering how I plan to return her to her proper shape," Schmindrick offered. "Wonder not. The power will come to me when I need it. I know that much now. One day it will come when I call, but that time is not yet." Impulsively he seized Molly Grew, hugging her head in his long arms. "But you were right," he cried. "You were right. It is there, and it is mine." Molly pulled away from him, one cheek ruffed red and both ears mashed. The girl sighed in her lap, ceased to smile, turned her face from the sunrise. Molly said, "Schmindrick, you poor man, you magician, don't you see?" "See what? There's nothing to see." But his voice was suddenly hard and wary, and the green eyes were beginning to be frightened. "The red bull came for a unicorn, so she had to become something else. You begged me to change her. What is it that frets you now?" Molly shook her head in the wavering way of an old woman. She said, "I didn't know you meant to turn her into a human girl. You would have done better." She did not finish, but looked away from him. One hand continued to stroke the white girl's hair. "The magic chose the shape, not I," Schmindrick answered. "A mountebank may select his cheat or that, but a magician is a porter, a donkey carrying his master where it must. The magician calls, and the magic chooses. If it changes a unicorn to a human being, then that was the only thing to do." His face was fevered with an ardent delirium, which made him look even younger. "I am a bearer," he sang. "I am a dwelling. I am a messenger." "You are an idiot," Molly Grew said fiercely. "Do you hear me? You're a magician all right, but you're a stupid magician." But the girl was trying to wake, her hands opening and closing, and her eyelids beating like birds' breasts. As Molly and Schmindrick looked on, the girl made a soft sound and opened her eyes. They were farther apart than common, and somewhat deeper set. They were as dark as the deep sea, and illuminated like the sea by strange, glimmering creatures that never rise to the surface. The unicorn could have been transformed into a lizard, Molly thought, or into a shark, a snail, a goose, and somehow still her eyes would have given the change away. To me, anyway. I would know. The girl lay without moving, her eyes finding herself in Molly's eyes and in Schmendrick's. Then in one motion she was on her feet, the black cloak falling back across Molly's lap. For a moment she turned in a circle, staring at her hands, which she held high and useless close to her breast. She bobbed and shambled like an ape doing a trick, and her face was the silly, bewildered face of a joker's victim. And yet she could make no move that was not beautiful. Her trapped terror was more lovely than any joy that Molly had ever seen, and that was the most terrible thing about it. "Donkey," Molly said. "Messenger." "I can change her back," the magician answered hoarsely. "Don't worry about it. I can change her back." Shining in the sun, the white girl hobbled to and fro on her strong young legs. She stumbled suddenly and fell, and it was a bad fall because she did not know how to catch herself with her hands. Molly flew to her, but the girl crouched on the ground staring at her and spoke in a low voice. "What have you done to me?" Molly began to cry. Schmendrick came forward, his face cold and wet, but his voice level. "I turned you into a human being to save you from the Red Bull. There was nothing else I could do. I will turn you to yourself again as soon as I can." "The Red Bull," the girl whispered. She was trembling wildly, as though something were shaking and hammering at her skin from within. "He was too strong," she said. "Too strong. And there was no end to his strength, and no beginning. He is older than I." Her eyes widened, and it seemed to Molly that the bull moved in them, crossing their depths like a flaming fish and vanishing. The girl began to touch her face timidly, recoiling from the feel of her own features. Her curled fingers brushed the mark on her forehead, and she closed her eyes and gave a thin, stabbing howl of loss and weariness and utter despair. "What have you done to me?" she cried. "I will die here." She tore at the smooth body, and blood followed her fingers. "I will die here. I will die." Yet there was no fear in her face, though it ramped in her voice, her hands, her feet, and the white hair that fell down over her new body. Her face remained quiet and untroubled. Molly huddled over her, as near as she dared, begging her not to hurt herself, but Schmendrick said, "Be still," and the two words cracked like autumn branches. He said, "The magic knew what it was doing. Be still and listen." "Why did you not let the bull kill me?" the white girl moaned. "Why did you not leave me to the harpy? That would have been kinder than closing me in this cage." The magician winced, remembering Molly Grew's mocking accusation, but he spoke with a desperate calmness. "In the first place, it's quite an attractive shape," he said. "You couldn't have done much better and still remained human." She looked at herself, sideways at her shoulders and along her arms, then down her scratched and welting body. She stood on one foot to inspect the soul of the other, cocked her eyes up to see the silver brows, squinted down her cheeks to catch a flash of her nose, and even peered closely at the sea-green veins inside her wrists, themselves as gaily made as young otters. At last she turned her face to the magician, and again he caught his breath. "I have made magic," he thought, but sorrow winked sharp in his throat, like a fish-hook setting fast. "All right," he said. "It would make no difference to you if I had changed you into a rhinoceros, which is where the whole silly myth got started. But in this guise, you have some chance of reaching King Haggard and finding out what has become of your people. As a unicorn, you would only suffer their fate, unless you think you could defeat the bull if you met him a second time." The white girl shook her head. "No," she answered, "never. Another time I would not stand so long." Her voice was too soft, as though its bones had been broken. She said, "My people are gone, and I will follow them soon, whatever shape you trap me in. But I would have chosen any other than this for my prison. A rhinoceros is as ugly as a human being, and it too is going to die, but at least it never thinks that it is beautiful." No, it never thinks that, the magician agreed. That's why it goes on being a rhinoceros and will never be welcome at Haggard's court. But a young girl, a girl to whom it can never mean anything that she is not a rhinoceros, such a girl, while the king and his son seek to solve her, might unravel their own riddle until she comes to its end. Rhinoceri are not questing beasts, but young girls are. The sky was hot and curdled, and the sun had already melted into a lion-colored puddle, and on the plain of Hag's Gate nothing stirred but the stale, heavy wind. The naked girl with the flower mark on her forehead stared silently at the green-eyed man, and the woman watched them both. In the tawny morning, King Haggard's castle seemed neither dark nor accursed, but merely grimy, run down, and poorly designed. Its skinny spires looked nothing like a bull's horns, but rather like those on a jester's cap, or like the horns of a dilemma. Schmendrick thought, they never have just two. The white girl said, I am myself still. This body is dying. I can feel it rotting all around me. How can anything that is going to die be real? How can it be truly beautiful? Molly Grew put the magician's cloak around her shoulders again, not for modesty or seemliness, but out of a strange pity, as though to keep her from seeing herself. I will tell you a story, Schmendrick said. As a child, I was apprenticed to the mightiest magician of all, the great Nikos, whom I have spoken of before. But even Nikos, who could turn cats into cattle, snowflakes into snowdrops, and unicorns into men, could not change me into so much as a carnival card sharp. At last he said to me, My son, your ineptitude is so vast, your incompetence so profound, that I am certain you are inhabited by a greater power than I have ever known. Unfortunately, it seems to be working backward at the moment, and even I can find no way to set it right. It must be that you are meant to find your own way, to reach your power in time. But frankly, you should live so long as that will take you. Therefore, I grant it that you shall not age from this day forth, but will travel the world round and round, eternally inefficient, until at last you come to yourself and know what you are. Don't thank me. I tremble at your doom. The white girl regarded him out of the unicorn's clear amaranthine eyes, gentle and frightening in the unused face, but she said nothing. It was Molly Grew who asked, And if you should find your magic, what then? Then the spell will be broken, and I will begin to die, as I began at my birth. Even the greatest wizards grow old, like other men, and die. He swayed and nodded, and then slapped awake again, a tall, thin, shabby man, smelling of dust and drink. I told you that I was older than I look, he said. I was born mortal, and I have been immortal for a long, foolish time, and one day I will be mortal again. So I know something that a unicorn cannot know. Whatever can die is beautiful, more beautiful than a unicorn, who lives forever, and who is the most beautiful creature in the world. Do you understand me? No, she said. The magician smiled wearily. You will. You're in the story with the rest of us now, and you must go with it, whether you will or no. If you want to find your people, if you want to become a unicorn again, then you must follow the fairy tale to King Haggard's castle, and wherever else it chooses to take you. The story cannot end without the princess. The white girl said, I will not go. She stepped away, her body weary, and the cold hair falling down. She said, I am no princess, no mortal, and I will not go. Nothing but evil has happened to me since I left my forest, and nothing but evil can have become of unicorns in this country. Give me my true shape again, and I will return to my trees, to my pool, to my own place. Your tail has no power over me. I am a unicorn. I am the last unicorn. Had she said that once before, long ago, in the blue-green silence of the trees? Schmendrick continued to smile, but Molly Grew said, Change her back. You said you could change her. Let her go home. I cannot, the magician answered. I told you, the magic is not mine to command, not yet. That is why I too must go on to the castle, and the fate or fortune that awaits there. If I tried to undo the transformation now, I might accidentally turn her into a rhinoceros. That would be the best thing that could happen. As for the worst, he shivered and fell silent. The girl turned from them and looked away at the castle that stooped over the valley, She could see no movement at any window or among the tottering turrets, or any sign of the Red Bull, yet she knew that he was there, brooding in the castle's roots till night should fall again, strong beyond strength, invincible as the night itself. For a second time she touched the place on her forehead where her horn had been. When she turned again, they were asleep where they sat, the man and the woman. Their heads were pillowed on air, and their mouths hung open. She stood by them, watching them breathe, one hand holding the black cloak closed at her throat. Very faintly, for the first time, the smell of the sea came to her.